The day the Galactic Assembly made its decision was like no other in Earth's history. It was not a day of celebration or victory, but one that would change the future of all humanity forever. For years, Earth had reached out beyond its skies, sending signals, hopes, and ambassadors to the great coalition of alien civilizations that ruled the stars. This assembly was a council of many worlds, each ancient and wise in their own way, and they held the power to decide who could join their ranks. For humans, joining the assembly meant safety, knowledge, and acceptance. It meant Earth would no longer be a lonely planet, forgotten in a vast universe. But the Assembly's decision was not what anyone on Earth had hoped for. Inside the grand chamber where representatives from dozens of species gathered, the humans waited anxiously. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The alien delegates whispered among themselves, some curious, others indifferent. Earth's lead ambassador, a woman named Dr. Lena Morales, stood at the front, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared to receive the final verdict. The message was clear and cruel. The Assembly had denied Earth membership. Their reason was simple but harsh. Humanity was too young, too reckless, and too dangerous. The other species believed Earth's people had not yet learned to control their own power. They worried that if given access to the greater technologies and knowledge shared among the Assembly, humans might cause chaos not just for themselves, but for the whole galaxy. The verdict felt like a slap in the face. After all the years of peaceful contact, all the demonstrations of good faith and hard work to rise beyond their violent past, humanity was being told they were not ready. It was a rejection that cut deep, not just politically but emotionally. It was a message that said, "You don't belong here." But as Dr. Morales returned to Earth with the news, she uncovered something even worse, something the Assembly had hidden from public view. The real reason behind the rejection was not fear, but jealousy. Humans had made huge leaps in technology and spirit in a very short time. While other civilizations in the Assembly had grown slowly and carefully over millions of years, humanity had surged forward in just a few centuries. They had rebuilt their planet, healed many of their wounds, and even started to reach the stars with ships and colonies. Some members of the Assembly saw this rapid progress as a threat. They feared what humans might become if left unchecked. Instead of welcoming humanity, they chose to hold them back, to keep Earth isolated. They cut off technology exchanges, restricted human access to certain parts of space, and quietly imposed sanctions on Earth's fledgling colonies. Back on Earth, the people were stunned when the truth began to leak out. The betrayal was not just political, it was personal. It was a betrayal of trust. At first there was anger. Governments demanded answers. Protests filled the streets and people shouted their outrage to the skies. But amid the chaos, a quiet but powerful idea began to grow. If the Assembly would not accept humanity, then humanity would no longer need the Assembly. Scientists, leaders, and thinkers came together, united by a common goal, to find a way to leave the galaxy behind and build their own future. This was not an easy choice. Leaving Earth was like saying goodbye to everything they had ever known. It was leaving behind their families, their homes, and their history. But the betrayal had shown that staying meant being trapped, forever held back by others who feared them. Behind the scenes, secret projects began to take shape. Humanity poured its greatest minds and resources into building ships unlike anything the Assembly had ever seen. These ships did not rely on the slow and limited travel methods that most civilizations used. Instead, they developed a new kind of faster-than-light travel, a leap into the unknown, risky but powerful enough to break free from the Assembly's reach. They called it Project Exodus. At first, only a few knew about it. It was a whisper among the stars, a hope that burned quietly in hidden labs and underground bunkers. Entire cities were slowly prepared to be lifted from the planet, carefully dismantled and loaded onto massive arcs designed for the long journey into deep space. As preparations went on, there were those who chose to stay behind. Some believed humanity's place was on Earth, to fight for their home no matter the cost. Others didn't trust the secret projects, fearing what leaving might mean. But most understood that the betrayal by the Assembly left humanity with no other choice. The moment to leave was filled with a strange mix of hope and sadness. There were no grand speeches or celebrations. Instead, there was a quiet determination. Before the final ships left, Earth sent a message to the galaxy. It was short but clear. "We are leaving. Do not follow." Then, like a miracle or a ghost, Earth disappeared from known space. The ships traveled faster than anything anyone had dreamed possible, slipping beyond the reach of the assembly's sensors. The colonies on distant planets went silent. The stations once filled with human voices now empty. Years turned into decades. And decades into centuries. No one came back. The assembly sent fleets and probes, searching the places where humanity was last seen. They found nothing but empty space and strange distortions in time and gravity, as if something had ripped the very fabric of reality. The silence only grew deeper. On Earth, or rather where Earth had been, only memories remained. Stories of the betrayal, of the hope, and of the departure. The humans who left became legends, heroes who refused to be chained by the fears of others and chose to carve their own destiny. For those left behind, the question haunted them every day. Had humanity really disappeared, or had they become something greater? Something beyond the limits of time and space? No one knew. But one thing was certain. The Assembly's betrayal had changed the course of history forever, and humanity was gone. After the betrayal, the world changed in ways no one had ever imagined. The news that the Galactic Assembly had rejected Earth spread like wildfire. But what shocked everyone even more was the secret truth that came out afterward. That the Assembly wasn't just afraid of humanity, but jealous and scared of what humans could become. This betrayal united people in a way that nothing else ever had. For decades, nations had fought wars, struggled with inequality, and faced countless problems. But now all those old divisions seemed small compared to the fact that humanity as a whole had been turned away by the very beings they had hoped to call friends. Instead of falling apart, people came together. Leaders from every corner of the globe met secretly, sharing knowledge and resources. Scientists worked with engineers, soldiers trained alongside civilians, and everyday people gave their time and energy to one purpose: to leave. It wasn't just a decision made by governments or a small group of experts. It became a movement felt by millions. The idea spread that if the galaxy didn't want them, then maybe it was time for humanity to find a new home, a place where they could grow without limits. The plan was bold. The Assembly controlled space travel and technology tightly. They watched Earth closely to make sure humanity didn't break any rules, so humans had to act in secret. For years, brilliant minds worked on new kinds of ships that could travel far beyond the slow routes the Assembly monitored. These vessels didn't need the usual technology everyone else used. They relied on new ideas about space and time that many thought impossible. The project was called Exodus, and it was the greatest secret of all time. People began to build massive ships, huge enough to carry thousands of people, entire cities even. These ships were designed to support life for long journeys, with farms, homes, schools, and hospitals inside. Everything humanity would need to start again, far away from the place they once called home. But leaving wasn't easy. There was fear. What if the journey failed? What if the new world was worse? What if they never saw Earth again? Families cried as they said their goodbyes, not knowing if they'd ever meet again. Still, the hope of freedom and a future beyond the Assembly's control kept them going. The first ships launched quietly, slipping through the dark sky without warning. People watched from the ground, tears in their eyes, waving goodbye to those who carried their hopes and dreams. As more ships followed, entire cities were slowly lifted off the planet. Earth grew quieter, emptier, until finally it seemed to hold its breath. The message humanity sent to the stars before leaving was simple and powerful. We are leaving. Do not follow. This was not a threat or a challenge. It was a warning. Humans had learned that trying to fight the Assembly was pointless. Instead, they chose to disappear, to escape to a place no one could reach. Years turned into decades. The ships traveled farther and farther, crossing regions of space no one had ever visited. Humanity became explorers, pioneers of the unknown, but they were also alone. The colonies they had left behind slowly lost contact. Messages sent out were never returned. The Assembly, confused and frustrated, sent fleets to search for the missing humans, but all they found was silence. In the emptiness of space, humans had become ghosts. On Earth, the story of the Exodus became legend. Some refused to believe it was true, thinking humans had perished or been destroyed. Others held on to hope, telling stories of a new home, a place where humanity would rise stronger than ever. For those who stayed behind, life was different. Governments struggled to maintain order, but without the bright hope of joining the stars, many fell into despair. Others tried to keep Earth's spirit alive, sending signals into space, hoping to hear back from the lost ships. But the universe did not answer. Inside the ships, life was hard. The journey through deep space was long and full of challenges. Resources were limited, and the crews had to learn how to survive in a new way. Children were born among the stars, the first generation who had never set foot on Earth. These children grew up with stories of a home they had never seen, told by the adults who remembered. The humans aboard the Exodus ships became closer than any community on Earth had ever been. They worked together, shared their skills, and supported each other. Every success, every small victory was celebrated as a step toward a future where humanity could live free. But the loneliness was always there. The vastness of space was both beautiful and terrifying. Sometimes the ships would pass strange glowing clouds or distant stars, reminders of the galaxy they had left behind. At night, people would look out their windows wondering if anyone was watching them from afar. Despite everything, hope never died. The leaders of the Exodus knew that returning was not an option. The Assembly would never welcome them back. They had to build a new future, one where humans would not be judged or held back. This new future was uncertain, but it was theirs. Slowly, the ships began to settle on planets far from the places the Assembly controlled. Some were barren and harsh, others had the promise of life. Humans learned to adapt, planting crops, building homes, and raising families. The spirit of Earth lived on in every heart. Though the Assembly could no longer watch them, humanity continued to grow stronger. They learned from their mistakes, working to build societies based on cooperation and respect. They shared stories, music, and art, keeping their culture alive in the darkness of space. Sometimes, strange signals would be detected near the borders of Assembly-controlled space. These signals were unlike anything the aliens had heard before, filled with passion, determination, and a sense of something more. The Assembly began to realize that maybe, just maybe, humanity was not gone. Maybe they had become something greater. But no one could say for sure. Back on Earth, those left behind wondered if they would ever see their people again. But for those aboard the Exodus ships looking out into the endless night, the future was a blank canvas. They had betrayed the past, but they held the power to paint a new story, a story where humanity was free. After many years of searching, the Galactic Assembly was still unable to find any sign of humanity. It was as if Earth and all the ships that had left with its people had vanished into thin air. No messages returned, no signals answered, no ships or colonies were found. The vast emptiness where humanity once was only deepened the mystery and confusion among the alien civilizations. The Assembly's leaders became restless. They had grown used to being in control, to knowing what was happening across the stars. But humanity's disappearance challenged everything they thought they understood about life in the universe. Some of the older races in the Assembly began to whisper about strange things happening near the last known human territories. Planets that once were lifeless suddenly showed signs of change. Energy patterns shifted in ways that didn't match any known technology. Even time itself seemed to behave oddly in those distant regions. The most curious and daring of the Assembly, a race called the Zalthi, volunteered to send a fleet deep into the uncharted spaces where humans had last been seen. The Zalthi were explorers at heart, patient, intelligent, and unafraid of the unknown. The Zalthi fleet traveled for months, passing through areas of space that other species avoided. As they moved closer to where humanity had vanished, strange things began to happen. Space around the ship seemed to twist and bend, as if the rules that usually governed the universe no longer applied. Communication devices failed or gave strange, distorted messages. The crew reported seeing flashes of light and hearing distant echoes that made no sense. When they reached the coordinates where Earth and its colonies had once existed, there was nothing but silence, no planets, no ships, no signs of life, only a strange distortion in space and time, like a wound in the fabric of the universe itself. The Zalthi fleet tried to send probes, but none returned. The ships hovered near the edge of this strange zone, unable to enter. Back at the Assembly, rumors grew about what might have happened to humanity. Some believed the humans had destroyed themselves, wiped out by their own technology or conflicts. Others thought they had found a new home far beyond anyone else's reach. A few whispered that humanity had become something else, something beyond physical form, beyond space and time. This idea was hard for many to accept. Most species in the assembly were tied to their physical bodies and lifespans. The thought that a species could evolve beyond that was almost unthinkable. But the Zalthi reported experiences that supported the theory. Members of their crew spoke of moments where time seemed to stop or loop. They heard voices, not in words, but feelings and memories shared across their minds. The assembly was divided. Some wanted to send more fleets to explore the strange zone. Others feared what they might find. The memories of humanity's rejection burned in their minds, and many worried that humans had finally become powerful in ways no one could control. Meanwhile, far from the assembly and its endless debates, humanity continued its journey. The descendants of the Exodus ships had settled on new worlds, learning to live with the challenges of alien environments. They grew stronger and wiser with each passing generation, their culture evolving in ways both familiar and new. Children born under unfamiliar skies listened to stories of Earth, of oceans, mountains, and cities lost to time. They dreamed of the blue planet but also knew their future was in the stars. Humanity was no longer the same people who had left Earth. They had changed, shaped by the vastness of space and the long journey through the unknown. And with those changes came new abilities, not magic, but a natural evolution of the mind and body. Some humans began to sense the flow of time differently. They could predict events moments before they happened or feel the emotions of others across great distances. Their connection to each other grew stronger, not through technology but through shared experience. The older generations watched these changes with wonder and sometimes fear. But they also understood that this was the next step in humanity's story, a story that no longer belonged to Earth but to the cosmos. Back in the assembly, the missing humans became a symbol. Some called them lost children of the stars. Others whispered of a terrible mistake, that the assembly had betrayed not only humanity but its own future. The idea that humanity had escaped and transcended inspired hope in some and dread in others. Yet, no one could deny one fact: humanity was gone, and with them, a mystery greater than any the galaxy had ever known. Years passed, and the assembly grew restless and uneasy. Their fleets and probes had searched every corner of known space, but no sign of humanity was ever found. Earth and its colonies seemed to have disappeared completely, swallowed by the dark void. But the universe itself was not silent. Near the edges of assembly space, strange things began to happen. Things that no one could explain. Planets that were once barren suddenly showed signs of life and energy. Worlds that had been dead for centuries now pulsed with an unknown light. Ships passing through these areas reported unusual readings, radiation patterns that didn't match any technology known to the assembly, and strange whispers in their communication devices. It was as if the universe itself was trying to tell a story, one that no one fully understood. Alien scientists and explorers were baffled. They had never seen anything like these changes. Some called it a miracle, others a curse. The energy surges were unpredictable and powerful, causing ships to lose control or systems to fail. Yet in the same places, abandoned cities began to show signs of repair, almost as if something unseen was rebuilding them. The assembly could no longer ignore these strange phenomena. They formed special research teams and sent out expeditions to study the anomalies. The Zalthi, known for their courage and curiosity, were the first to arrive. When the Zalthi explorers landed on one of these mysterious planets, they found something extraordinary. There were structures, buildings, and machines that were clearly of human origin, but they had changed. They were no longer made of ordinary metal or stone, but seemed to shimmer with energy, alive in a way that defied explanation. The explorers also found symbols and writings, messages left behind by humans. These messages were strange and beautiful, full of hope and warning. They spoke of a new beginning, a future beyond the stars, and a promise to never forget where they came from. The Zalthi reported these discoveries back to the assembly. Their words sparked both awe and fear. Some assembly members believed humanity had found a way to evolve, to become more than flesh and bone. Others feared that these changes were dangerous, signs that humans had gained powers that could threaten all life. In the following months, more discoveries followed. Space travelers began reporting mysterious devices drifting in the void, glowing with a soft light and humming with unknown energy. These devices seemed to respond to no known commands, yet they moved purposefully, as if guided by a hidden intelligence. One such device was found by a mining crew working near the edge of assembly space. The device suddenly activated and spoke a simple message in every language at once. Still watching. Still learning. Still alone, the crew was terrified. They brought the device back to the assembly's capital, where it became the subject of endless debate and study. The message was unsettling. Who or what was watching and learning, and what did it mean to be still alone? Some assembly members thought it was a warning, a sign that humanity was watching from afar, waiting and growing stronger. Others believed it was a plea for help or a sign of sadness, that humanity was lost and lonely in the vastness of space. Amid these mysteries, the assembly's fear turned into paranoia. They began to prepare for a possible return of humanity, not as refugees, but as something more powerful, maybe even dangerous. They increased their military presence near the strange anomalies, building defense systems and sending more ships to patrol the borders. But the humans did not return. Instead, strange signals continued to appear, but always from a distance, always just out of reach. The assembly grew more divided. Some believed that humanity had transcended their physical form and no longer existed in a way the assembly could understand. Others thought humans had become trapped in a place outside time, unable to come back. Stories and rumors spread among the different species. Stories of a new kind of human, one that was not bound by space or time. These humans could appear and disappear, move through worlds unseen, and communicate without words. Some called them ghosts, others spirits, but the humans themselves were silent. Meanwhile, humanity on the other side of the galaxy continued to evolve. The descendants of the Exodus ships had learned to live with the strange energies of the new worlds. They had grown closer together, their minds linked in ways that allowed them to share thoughts, memories, and feelings across great distances. This connection made them strong, but also isolated. They knew they were different now, no longer just people, but something new. They had left behind the fear and limits of their past. They no longer needed to hide or fight for survival. Instead, they focused on understanding the universe and their place within it. Sometimes the humans wondered if the assembly would ever understand or accept them. But they had made their choice. They had left to be free, and they would not return to be controlled. The humans became legends across the stars, stories told by those who hoped or feared their return. Some species built temples in their honor, praying for their safety. Others prepared for war, convinced that humanity was a threat waiting to strike. But for the humans themselves, the future was still unwritten. They were explorers, survivors, and dreamers. And their journey was far from over. In the silent depths of space where time bent and reality twisted, humanity had found a new beginning. A beginning that no one, not even the assembly, could control. For centuries, humanity's story had been one of struggle, growth, and hope. After the betrayal by the Galactic Assembly and their departure from the known galaxy, humans had become something new, explorers in a vast, strange universe. They had faced loneliness and challenges, but also discovered strength and unity in the power of their own will. Now, many generations later, the descendants of those first Exodus ships had grown into a civilization unlike any other. Their minds were connected, their senses sharpened, and their technology advanced far beyond what Earth had ever known. They had learned to travel faster, to heal wounds quickly, and to live in harmony with the strange new worlds they called home. But despite all their progress, a question always remained in the hearts of every human. Could they ever return to the galaxy they had left behind? Could they ever reconnect with the assembly or even with Earth itself? The answer was uncertain. Among the humans, a small group of explorers volunteered for a new mission, to find a way back to the assembly's space. They were curious, brave, and hopeful. They believed that maybe after so many years the assembly might be ready to listen, or at least understand their journey was difficult. The space they traveled was strange and unpredictable. Time bent and twisted in ways that made navigation almost impossible. They relied not just on machines, but on their deep connection to each other, sharing thoughts, feelings, and even memories to guide their way. Along the journey, they encountered worlds that defied explanation. Planets where the skies shimmered with colors no human eye had seen before, oceans that glowed softly in the dark, forests that whispered with voices carried by the wind. These worlds felt alive, almost like they were part of a larger mind, a living, breathing universe that humans were only beginning to understand. During their travels, the explorers found relics of their past. Old ships lost in time, stations abandoned and empty, messages etched in stone or metal that told stories of those who had come before. Each discovery was a reminder of their history and a warning of the dangers they still faced. They also faced new threats, strange creatures born from the energies of the universe, hostile beings who saw humans as invaders, and natural disasters that could destroy entire planets in moments. But the humans' greatest challenge was something closer to home, the question of identity. As their powers grew and their connection deepened, some began to wonder if they were still the same people who had left Earth so long ago. Were they still human, or had they become something else? This question caused disagreements and doubts. Some wanted to hold on to the old ways, to remember Earth, to keep traditions alive. Others believed that to survive and thrive, humanity had to change, to become new beings suited for the cosmos. Despite their differences, they knew one thing clearly: their unity was their greatest strength. Without it, they would be lost in the vastness of space. As the explorers finally approached the edges of the Assembly's territory, they sent a message, a simple greeting filled with hope and peace. The Assembly received the message with shock. No one had expected humanity to return. After all these years of silence and mystery, here they were again reaching out. The Assembly was divided in their response. Some wanted to welcome the humans back, to learn from them and make peace. Others feared the power humans had gained, worried that this new humanity might be too strong or unpredictable. The debate went on for months, with meetings and arguments that echoed through the halls of the Assembly's Great Council. Meanwhile, the human explorers waited, watching and hoping. Then, the Assembly made a decision. A meeting would be held. Representatives from both sides would come together to talk, to listen, and to try to find a way forward. When the meeting began, the humans told their story of betrayal, exile, survival, and growth. They spoke not just with words, but with shared memories and emotions that bridged the gap between different species. The Assembly listened, and for the first time truly understood what humanity had endured. It was not easy. Old fears and wounds ran deep, but slowly a new respect grew. The humans showed that they had not come back for revenge or power. They came for understanding and connection. The Assembly in turn shared their own fears and hopes. In the end, they agreed on something important. No species should be judged by fear or jealousy. Every being deserved a chance to grow, to change, and to be part of the universe. A new era began. The Assembly and humanity worked together, sharing knowledge and resources. The barriers that had once kept them apart slowly came down. Humans were welcomed not just as members of the Assembly, but as partners in shaping the future of the galaxy. Yet even as they built this new future, humanity remembered the past, the betrayal, the pain, and the exile that had shaped them. They remembered Earth too. Though it was distant and changed, it was still the place where their story began. The journey had been long and difficult, but it was far from over. Humanity had left the stars behind once, and now they were finally ready to find their place among them again, together. After the historic meeting between humanity and the Galactic Assembly, a new chapter began. It was a chapter full of hope, but also filled with challenges no one could have predicted. For centuries, humans had lived apart from the rest of the galaxy, growing in their own way, building a new civilization far from Earth. Now, as they returned to the stars they once knew, everything was different. The galaxy had changed, and so had humanity. The reunion wasn't easy. There was fear on both sides, fear of the unknown, fear of old wounds reopening, fear of what the future might bring. But there was also something stronger, a shared desire for peace and understanding. Humans and aliens began to work together. They exchanged stories, ideas, and knowledge. Humans shared their unique way of connecting minds and hearts. their ability to feel and understand each other deeply. Aliens shared their technology, their wisdom gained over millions of years. This exchange created a bond that grew stronger every day. For the first time in a long time, humanity didn't feel like outcasts, but like partners in a larger community. Despite the progress, the road ahead was full of questions. Could humans truly fit into the galaxy they had left? Would the Assembly ever fully trust them? And what about Earth, their home, the place that started it all? Earth was now different. The years of loneliness and neglect had taken their toll. Cities lay in ruins. Nature struggled to survive, and the few who remained lived in fear and isolation. But humans had never forgotten their home. Plans were made to send teams back to Earth. These teams were not just explorers or scientists, but also builders and healers. Their mission was to restore Earth, to bring life back to the blue planet. The first ships landed quietly. People stepped onto the soil their ancestors had left behind, feeling a mix of sorrow and hope. The planet was scarred, but its spirit was still alive. Humans began to work together with the remaining Earthlings, sharing knowledge and resources. Slowly, forests grew again, rivers flowed clearer, and cities started to pulse with life once more. The return to Earth was more than a restoration. It was a reunion. People who had been separated by time and distance came together, sharing stories of survival and dreams for the future. As Earth healed, so did humanity. The connection between humans across the galaxy grew stronger. The shared experience of exile, growth, and return created a bond that no distance could break. Humans were no longer just from Earth or from the Exodus ships. They were a new people, shaped by the stars, united by hope. The Galactic Assembly, too, had changed. They learned from humanity's journey, the mistakes of rejection, the power of unity, and the importance of trust. Together, humans and the Assembly worked to build a galaxy where all species could live in peace and freedom. They created new laws and councils to ensure no one would ever be betrayed or left behind again. But even in this new era, humanity remembered the lessons of the past. They never forgot the betrayal that forced them to leave, the loneliness of exile, or the courage it took to survive. And they carried these memories as a guide, a reminder to be strong, to be kind, and to always reach for the stars. Their story was no longer just about survival. It was about hope, unity, and the endless possibilities of the future. The Assembly had betrayed Earth once, but humanity had found a way to rise beyond that betrayal. They had left, they had survived, and now at last they had come home.